Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the fourth episode of Reaction Time. Yes, it's the fourth episode, even though you never saw a third episode. I promise we recorded it, or we talked at length about the first week of group stage, but somebody's computer shit
It do be like that sometimes. But I have a new graphics card and new lust for life.
A new graphics card will definitely fix human incompetence. Love you. I'm David. That's Steven, who I'm giving shit to. Eric is down below us, as he always is. Hello to you both. We come to you in our lovely central time zone here in the United States. It is, I believe, 7 hours before the start of World's quarterfinals. So you likely will be watching this after one of these matches has already concluded. So we apologize for any out-of-date content in that, but we all have lives and jobs and shit. So you're going to get us on the calendar that you get us. And if you're dedicated enough to watch it, so be it. So in the episode you didn't watch, we did talk through the first week of group stage. So we may skip over some points for that because we'll get the deja vu we already talked about at this point, but we'll do our best to cover some stuff from it. But we're going to take kind of a wider angle at how groups ended up after both weeks, since we didn't actually get an episode out last week. So to do that, let's start with perhaps the biggest story of them all. TSM shit in the bed. So at least one of us had TSM dead last in that group going in, and I believe if we check the tape, I said TSM would go 06.
I think you did.
Let me just say that right now that I was right on that one. So Eric, I'll start with you. Wide scale, everything went wrong. But what was the biggest problem that you saw with TSM in this group stage that led to their terrible performance?
Wow. One thing is hard.
You can do more than one thing, but pick somewhere to start and go.
All right. Well, I'll start with the fact that Bjergsen got bodied on Zillion for the first time, like, this year, really. So a lot of it was just, like, people actually beating it in lane and punishing this pick. So in NALCS, in this split, Bjergsen had a -1 CSD on Zillion for 15 minutes. So he was effectively even in lane with everyone when he was playing this champion in NA. And he was usually up 400 experience at 15 minutes, which is pretty substantial. When he played Zillion at Worlds, he was down 8.5 CS at 15 minutes on average. One of the games was worse than that, and he was down like 350 experience, so losing experience on Zillion in mid lane. So that was like the big offset to me, is that like their nonsense BS that let them like win matchups they shouldn't necessarily have won in NA got very punished every time at the world stage, and they didn't adapt very well. He even had the match on LeBlanc, which was, that was Bjergsen's attempt, in my opinion, at trying to actually take a carry role in their team comp and force a win. And he didn't look good on the LeBlanc either. And even that game, though, wasn't really just his fault that they lost, but like he didn't get a lead in lane, and then they didn't win the game.
Steven, what did you see? Was there anything different from that really stuck out to you?
I think that even from NA playoffs and going into Worlds, there was just not the team communication and team trust. I think we talked about how Spica was doing the Baron, and then everybody peeled off, and he was like, and then smote to stay alive, and then dies. And then everybody just walks back like, oh, we had it. And then they just get the Baron smote away. And I think that was just like one of many instances where there's like really stark miscommunications going on.
Well, the other real obvious big moment was the 5-man sleep on Lilia, right? Like that Spica hits this beautiful 5-man Lilia ultimate. Everybody's asleep, and they don't do anything. They do nothing. Nothing happens.
And I don't see Spica as like I'm running it in and doing it what my way kind of player, and those were good plays, and why they weren't followed up on, or why he doesn't feel like he can call it out. Maybe it looks like a shot calling issue, or at least him being vocal in the comms to me, and knowing nothing.
It really was a collapse on like everything that went well for them in LCS playoffs, because like their pick ban went to being atrocious. They like in their first match against Fnatic, which is deja vu. We already talked about this one. They let them have Evelynn Lucian, which was how the only way they won games in playoffs essentially. And then in round 2 with Fnatic, they let them have Orianna Graves. So they just gave them both of the super high win rate picks, and like at that point you already knew that they had only won games with Nemesis on Lucian and Orianna, so why are you letting them do this? And like on top of all of that, they went back to not really playing around top lane. Broken Blade only had like a 22.1 gold percentage in Worlds, which is like lower than it was in LCS playoffs when they were winning. They just didn't show up and give them the heralds at all. They had like no herald priority. So overall, it was just like a massive reset. It was what I was expecting Fnatic to do, quite frankly, and instead it was TSM.
And Broken Blade, like you look at the KDAs across the six games: 3-2-3, 2-2-4, 0-4-2, 3-4-4, 2-2-2, 3-4-1. There was never a game where he was a problem area for this team. And in these games, like he's got 3 Camille games in here where arguably you maybe should be playing around him more than you did, and you picked a champion that could be played around and set up to split push to a win, and you didn't.
On top of that, like some of those, going back to the communications issues, like at least a couple of those games were, maybe just one, because Bjergsen only had the 2 Zillion games. I don't remember the comp with the second Zillion, but like in the first Zillion comp, he was on Camille, and he would ult in on engaging Camille, which is what like 100% the dream with this comp. You have Broken Blade, Camille ult in to engage, you give him the Zillion ult, you have all this follow-up damage. They've wasted all their abilities, like overloading damage onto Broken Blade to kill him the first time. And he would go in, get the Zillion ult, and the rest of TSM would have done no damage in the entire time for him to respawn. And that's just like such a gaffe in organizing how this comp is supposed to work and like what your win condition is, that it was very disappointing to see.
Yeah. So Eric, you and I have been talking over various versions of this question for almost as long as we've known each other. Where does TSM go from here? You have this spectacular, colossal failure at Worlds after one of their best appearances in years and in summer playoffs, and a quality an LCS championship, the first seed of the World Championship. So do these 6 games cause a rethink? And if you were running the show, what would you do?
Well, this is why I stopped being a TSN fan, because instead of like, trying to bring new blood in to run the show, they double down on Bjergsen being now a co-owner of the organization. So I don't, and Bjergsen's a great player, but I don't believe that they just extended Doublelift's contract. I think they're kind of SOL at this point, because like the only real upgrade they can make to their players is support in a clear way, because Spica started looking really good, and the coaching staff, which is ineffectual because of other issues. So best thing I can think of is you somehow like have Lena and Reggie take a step back from oversight on the org as much as possible, and you find a coach who Bjergsen likes and respects, and try and like get some better quality out of game or like practice scenarios for this team, because it's very clear that the players have the in-game skill to make this work, but that they are struggling with prep and with like making it come alive in some of these clutch games. So I really think that the best chance they have is they somehow make a coaching staff work for this org, and I think that you need to take one of the cooks out of the kitchen in order to make that happen.
I think they should call Yamato yesterday.
That would be insane, because it really does look like a motivation issue as well, as much as that is a meme with Double Lift. Like they had it all together just a few weeks before all this happened, and then when NA kind of started looking and just being in a maybe something that they themselves don't anticipate winning, they just kind of phone it in. And I think that goes into motivation and staffing and like, hey, like, still play to win, guys.
Well, some amount of that can just be TSM syndrome, which is like you have like there are so many memes, but then also NA fans that like you need to have. I cut them some slack there because like when you hear stuff like even throughout multiple years of history for this org, players on this team always put in the hours. They always grind incredibly, like they play a lot of solo queue compared with some of the other teams in LCS. But what ends up happening then like is burnout. And like so finding a way though to like make practice time more meaningful is how you make that growth then. You have to go for some kind of quality growth in practice for making this succeed.
My other take, because I have a part 2 on that. With Yamato becoming open, I think that just makes too much sense to you have to at least ask if he's willing to do it, because that seems like it could be the fit they're looking for. He's obviously a veteran coach. He's now coached in Europe and Korea with experience in Sandbox, and having chosen not to renew that contract, he's a free agent. I think you got to make the call and just have that conversation and see what he's willing to do. The second thing is I think they need to start Lost in Treats day one of Spring Split. Both of them. I think
Treats is being allowed to explore options right now.
And I think that's a mistake.
Well, I'm
going to be really clear.
Like, maybe in a future episode we can talk about, like, NA region, our opinion on the players' organization and some other stuff, because I kind of think that you'll see a lot of players in NA being allowed to explore options while still under contract and then not moving. And that's
same for Europe too, I think, honestly.
Yeah, and that's interesting. But like, I'd prefer to talk about that in like its own episode, or where we're talking about something other than Worlds.
Off-season spice, I like that.
My hot take is I think they just need to bench Double Lift, even though they just signed his contract. Like, I think Lost in Treats from their academy should start immediately in LCS. You build around Spica and Broken Blade. You see what you have in Lost in Treats. Particularly now that Lost doesn't count as an import, because that is an important development to their roster. Like, you need to see what you've got with them, and you need to build around your top
I
side.
think you still have the opportunity with, like, you paid for Double Lift's contract, use him to start training and cultivating talent. Like, get Lost, get a, like, TSM Next or whatever going, get this long-term talent funnel moving while you still have this.
And again, we have no reason to believe they'll actually do any of this based on their track record. But
no.
This is what I would do if I was
if you wanted it to actually work.
Like, I would prefer if we go to that bridge, like, in a future episode. Because I can talk about my opinions on the idea of having Double Lift train support players later.
Not right now.
What a tease.
Not right now.
What a tease.
Goodbye to TSM. We will not miss you very much. Goodbye also from that group to LGD, who I thought acquitted themselves very well for the majority of this, but week 2 Fnatic was too strong. Eric, any closing thoughts on LGD's performance in the tournament?
No, not really. I love watching Chie play Echo. I wish they would have forced Nemesis onto Syndra more, so then they could
spank,
style. Yeah.
I think that they were largely more impressive than anyone expected them to be, even in going out in third.
None of the play-ins teams made it out of groups, did they?
That's correct.
Correct.
I think they performed the best of the play-ins teams.
Rip my other bracket. Cough. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you and me both. Uh, that being said, let's move on. Any closing thoughts on Unicorns of Love's The Other
Oof.
06?
It's very sad that like all their spice picks they unleashed were like slow scaling things that then like were designed for late game action, because like they needed help early is where they really needed it. Where like mid and bot were really getting abused in a lot of their matches.
No man's getting bopped in every single game they played was a huge problem.
Yeah, and you can, I mean, he's laying in this group with Knight, Chovy, Power of Evil. So like, and in their second round with PoE, and like he just popped off. But man, like it was pretty brutal. They needed some spice early, and they just didn't have it. So that was very unfortunate.
We hoped after play-ins to see that the gap was closing a little bit between the play-in regions, if you will, and the Big Four, Big Five. And I mean, NA kind of looked bad, but the other one, it just wasn't close. Even like they played 2 games against FlyQuest, and it was not close. So, for how dominant they were in LCL, that's disappointing to see on a wider scale. But it is what it is. They got the experience. They'll be back later.
I think that speaks to the like FlyQuest has solidified themselves as an upper bracket NA team. I think they have performed as well as any other NA team, barring C9 in Worlds, and I think they really will always be seen as maybe not one of the top tier because of prestige or longevity. I can't tell what it is, but they've consistently performed since franchising. So
they need a title.
They need one. I think
they need,
and they were damn close
to legitimize them, because it's when it is the situation that C9, TSM, now TL, and CLG in days past are the only NA orgs to win titles. They had a shot in the springtime making the final against C9. It will take a domestic title to solidify FlyQuest as we're truly in the big boys club. Even with this performance, I think that's 100% true. Eric, you're wearing a FlyQuest shirt. What were your thoughts on FlyQuest's group performance?
They, like TL, they got it together week 2, which is great. So like NA at Worlds usually has at least one trash week and 1 week that is slightly better. And seeing them perform week 2 was great. Watching both orgs get to 3-3 means that if we ignore TSM, the NA teams did like about as well as they normally do, which is end up in 3-3 and hopefully luck into a tiebreaker game. So that was great. The only reason that FlyQuest and TL didn't get that shot is because their 4th team in the group didn't give enough, I would kind of say, because that's normally how that 3-3 team breaks through, is when the 4th seed team gives us one upset. But I liked that they did figure out certain things about how to play the game in this meta that were pretty appropriate. I felt that FlyQuest's attempt at getting leads early game was more active than Team Liquid's, whereas Team Liquid's was more kind of luck of the draw in some instances, whereas FlyQuest was actively attempting to get the early toss, which is how they got that win over top. Was
the really early snowball for Wild Turtle out of that early game, which just let everything go according to plan for the rest of that game.
Does that speak to coaching staff and NA not able to read meta fast enough? Because if they had the week 1 that they had week 2, like top looks like a very good team to even pull.
Pause though. Think back about C9, what was it, 3 years ago, going 3-0 in week 1 with their one strategy, and then completely crapping the bed week 2, I don't think it's fair to say that NA has a problem with not figuring it out fast enough. That may have been what it was this year. That's not a consistent.
Well, I would say even if it's a week 2 figuring it out fast enough, like you have to be able to say, okay, we're gonna get red, or like, hey, we got red, we dropped a game when we didn't need to drop a game because we got red like a book. Let's adapt. Let's like, I'm saying like adaptation within game to game, not necessarily like.
So, I would phrase this more not necessarily as like. I don't actually think it's about adaptation game to game. I actually think it's in-game adaptation. And what I'm going to reference with this is that this has been NA's failing point in a lot of worlds, where my big other example of this happening is like and this meta was actually really good for us in a lot of ways. And so the fact that they fell short, like, out of not making it out of groups, and that TSM fell apart is really unfortunate. And what I mean by that is like I remember in TSM versus Misfits a while back, where TSM actually had another one of these set level 1 plays that was designed to create an early lead. Sven Skaren took his topside jungle, pressured in with backup from, I forget who their top laner was that year, and then like starts taking Max Lora's red side on the top of the map, and then and so Max Lore should be getting 3 camped, or 3 buffed, is gonna be way behind in this game, and then instead Max Lore ganks top level 2 by sneaking through the tri-bush on his own red side after like belly slamming on Gragas over the wall, while he knows Sven Skaren is doing his own red buff. And then he pulls off this gank because TSM's top laner just completely doesn't see it coming. It's a complete shocker. Just doesn't see the enemy jungler pressuring his side of the map. And then based off of that snowball, because TSM's top laner was like playing Jace, and it's meant to be a snowballing champion. TSM like falls behind instantly in every lane, they lose the game terribly. And like that's kind of this example that I see that happens like historically through multiple seasons of when these NA teams show up, they can have these level 1 strats, but then whenever enemy teams actually show up to fight or have creativity that lets them overcome this is when things fall apart, and they fall apart very quickly. And so like these set level 1 plays that are designed to really snowball in this meta with like the Lilia invade, with the late invades, with all these things that are designed to like just get a kill early or invade and get a buff like advantage for your scaling AP jungle nonsense. Like there's so much you can do early to take an advantage in this meta to then snowball a win off of lane advantage or off of just like getting to soul point super quickly in the game. And they just like, and in the games where these like underdog teams were able to do that, those were the few instances when upsets happened in group stage. The other big thing I want to call it is these upsets, when they did occur, they were all when teams were on red side of the map, and then had like this early game advantage for making this cheese work and interrupting jungle routes. So like that's like a consistent trend we saw so far. So look for red side upsets as we move forward in this tournament as where like these teams can get an advantage.
I would also like to note before we wrap up on FlyQuest, I think Power of Evil may have been the best performing player on any one of the 3 NA teams at this tournament. I know Core JJ is the other argument. That is a very, very strong argument. But you can say matchup, you can say the level 1 went bad. I did not think I would see Power of Evil Flame Horizon Knight in a game. He destroyed that lane against a player that has been regarded as the best player in the world going into this tournament. And PoE has gotten a lot of dap for a lot of things over a very long and respectable career. It's never been I'm going to go out and win you a game solo. he's never had that reputation, I don't think, over any of his career in Misfits and UOL and FlyQuest, any of this. He went out and he played absolutely incredibly across many of these games, almost solely won them one of their first game against UOL, and just had an absolutely outstanding tournament. So many props.
He's a big reason that they made it so far in the playoffs in NA. It was just his ability to play the game. So I think he's definitely solidified himself as a centerpiece on that team, at least. It is also Hanser. Hanser was the top laner on TSM. Because I was like, there's only been like 4 top laners for TSM. Like,
I've tried to forget all of them. Just like let them rest.
Eric, you have any closing thoughts in your beautiful FlyQuest shirt? Here, I'll feed you a softball. I know you don't want to talk rostering section right now, but do they stick with this 5, or do they think about changing solo out?
Oof. I really think they should. If they change anyone, like in my opinion, it would be Turtle. Turtle's really a face for the organization, and he's such a great guy that and that seems awkward to say in like a competitive setting, but like he still is winning lanes in NA, not necessarily internationally, against especially the lower tier teams. He still can show up in these team fights. He still flashes forward. Like, I don't know what else you like really want to ask for, except if some hotshot shows up. So but like to me, like Turtle and Ignar are like the 2 like actual wild cards in that roster. But like I still think both of them have the chops. I'd stick with this 5. I think they're really solid.
I think so too.
And give them just like a bit more time to really gel, and they're gonna continue to make playoffs and make deep runs.
What I think is interesting, tying kind of this discussion and the last one together, is I don't think we are that far away from a time where none of the 3 of Doublelift, Wild Turtle, and Sneaky are playing on an active LCS roster anymore. And that's going to be a very big change for LCS when all 3 of those, the biggest named ADCs in the history of NA, are all functionally retired, with Sneaky obviously already out of the picture and Double having an awful tournament this tournament. Turtle performing admirably, but you still, if FlyQuest wants to upgrade their ceiling, you have to question. I'm going to bring in the OPL names again. We talked about Raze from Legacy in past scene. He counts as an NA resident now, and you have to wonder if teams are going to be like, well, this might be worth a conversation to see if we can get something figured out to try and upgrade this. Seeing, as we move to the 3rd NA team to talk about, seeing how Tactical has succeeded as a new face and a new piece of TL's formula to success.
Write these down. Write these down for sure, too. Because we can definitely talk about, like, what are career paths outside of retirement, and what does OPL do to, like, off-season pickups, because I think this is, like, a very important conversation to have, and definitely good content.
We're definitely going to be coming back to this in about 4 weeks. Right about 4 weeks.
That's going to be fun, though.
But it's good to kind of put this over this as we tie a bow on these LCS teams and move on. So we are going to move to Team Liquid next, because I think that just is how this conversation has developed in Group A. TL also finishing 3-3 in their group, not getting the necessary help from G2 Esports to get their way into a tiebreaker with Suning to make their way. And Suning, who ended up winning the group, so they probably wouldn't have won the tiebreaker anyway, but didn't get the chance to go there. Steven, I will start with you, since I started with Eric for wearing the FlyQuest jersey. Steven, the TL fan, what do you feel good about coming out of this tournament?
High highs. They had high highs. They were able to pick a composition. They were able to play with agency, which was shocking and amazing to experience. And I hope that they can take that flexibility forward and cultivate that a little bit better. I feel like they beat themselves, I think, mostly in the fact that they just would not participate or try to make something happen to where they could get an advantage, and then do their normal TL shtick of get all the dragons eventually without giving up the first two, and get farmed up and build, like, cultivate an advantage. Like, all you need is just that little bump at the beginning to get started, and they took it sometimes, and that wasn't enough. So I think it's almost worse that they showcase that they can do it. They just don't always do it.
Eric, do you believe that TL can take the lessons they learned in week 2 back to NA for next spring?
I definitely do, and I think they're gonna also continue to look better, like FlyQuest. They've only really had one split with this coaching staff and with Tactical on their starting roster. I would definitely wait longer before trying to make an active decision, especially since they did manage to go 3-3. And where FlyQuest took like one game off of top, and then just got to beat UOL twice. Like TL actually had a very competitive group against all the teams and managed to take games against all three. And which that to me actually is more impressive in some ways than the win against Top, who I think is the best team overall. But like because they managed to do that against 3 different strong teams in opposition was really something. So yeah, for the most part. Also, like the fact that their Core JJ is just a monster. Like the game that they lost that second week was the one game where Core JJ didn't look like the best player on the map, and that's a really funny thing to say when you're it's your support who's doing all this work and really building Onus.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I come at this looking from a traditional sports perspective, as I do with a lot of the things that I watch, and TL is what you might call a win now roster, in that you have Tactical surrounded by 4 of the best veteran players you could possibly get around him in an LCS roster. Core, who's playing almost as well. Like, you could say he played better when he won a world championship, and that would be fair. He's playing some of the best League of Legends of his career right now. And Jensen, Broxa, and Impact are all like veteran title-winning players across a region that TL, you wonder, this was a disappointing ending for them, and not winning the summer split was a disappointing ending for them. I think that this roster could be absolutely unbelievable next year if they can keep what they've learned going on. They could be, I mean, we saw how dominant C9 was at Point Spring Split. Like, this is the roster that could be one of the best that NA's ever seen if they can really put all this together.
They should.
And they should. Where, like, compared to like a FlyQuest is on a growth spiral, but isn't on like, we need to win a title right now. And TSM is on the flip side of that, where our window might be closing and we might need to make changes. It's there are 3 different teams and 3 different like development patterns.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Gentlemen, now that we're done with the TL breakdown, any final thoughts on any of Machi Esports, Rogue, or PSG Talon before we get to the fun stuff?
I will.
Shout out to Tank, who had some really good games. Go Snake and all former Snake players in this tournament.
Tank looked legitimately very good in that group, which was interesting. He was not the reason PSG were last in that group. I thought Finn acquitted himself much better than people thought he would in all 6 of their games. I was honestly really impressed by how Rogue put it together, even though they didn't manage to take games off of either of the top 2 teams in their group. They really did pretty well.
And it really did feel like they were just mentally defeated going into that last game with Talon after losing their game 5. Because like there was definitely a drop off in their play
Yep.
in that last game.
And understandably so. That was the one
Yeah.
that mattered. All right, so with that, we've got quarterfinals. I'm going to make sure I go in order to talk about these so that you can skip past the one about tonight's one if you so choose. But we will start with the very first one that is at 5 a.m. in 6.5 hours, which is the LCK Civil War of these. Damwon Gaming against Dragon X. So, Eric, I'll start with you. What is your initial thought on this matchup? Is it going to be any different than spring playoffs or not?
So
Or summer
the only difference that I could see between this and playoffs is, well, all right, there's two factors. The first factor is that unlike their finals from playoffs, like I believe that this one's actually in person, and their finals game I believe was remote because of the typhoon. This wasn't the third place match, which was a complete travesty, and was my favorite viewing experience of esports of all time. But like I think it was also remote because of the typhoon. And so,
don't think so.
you don't think so? Oh, well then take that off the board.
Delete it.
Because this
Delete
was
it.
the final. This was the summer. This was the summer final.
Yeah, and it was very one-sided. It was a complete
It was
smash.
a stomp. It was not close.
Game 1, Damwon just drafted DRX's slow team fight comp and beat them with it, which was like the most disheartening thing. Definitely took the wind out of the sails. But the only difference that I can see is that I think Def's in better form now than he was in that finals game. He looks kind of recovered. I mean, obviously he still has back issues, and that's not just going to go away at the drop of a hat. But like his performance in group stage gave me some confidence that he's seen a slight return to form. So if they find a way to get advantages mid-end bot, then I see them having a better shot. But Damwon just looks incredible. So the odds still seem very low to me that there's any upset coming in this series.
The problem with getting an advantage mid is I look at this series from finals, and Chovy has good KDAs in each game, and Showmakers are just better. Like game 3 of this, it's Akali into Aurelia, and Chovy goes 5-3-1 on Aurelia, has a great game. Showmakers 8-1-9, and
Yeah.
just hard carries.
Well, so to be fair, their entire top side was hard carrying in that series. Like
That is true.
Canyon was putting on a clinic in that best of 5 that was 3 games. But like I don't view that as changing really. Like Piosik had a really good group stage, but I think a part of that was due to the nature of these teams that he was playing against in that group, where Top is not like oh my gosh, Top Esports is actually not like a team that I feel is super well positioned for this meta, based off of what Karsa's champion pool is and how he approaches the game. But they're just so good that it doesn't matter. And so Piosik like looking good in their early games against Top isn't like a surprise to me. So in this series, he's going to be against Canyon, who has a great early game and late game jungle performance, is much less about game state control and is more of like just like getting kills. So I expect this game to be pretty. I expect these games to be much more one-sided for the most part. Except
After the finals performance, I expect Dragon X to ban Nidalee every game,
Yes.
which has not been uncommon this tournament. But games 2 and 3 of this finals were Canyon going off on Nidalee. So it seems that feels pretty straightforward to me. There's other picks you can look at, but Canyon's Nidalee probably is something you need to deal with immediately. Steven, what are your thoughts on this series? Do you see Dragon X figuring it out, or is this just going to be an easy one for down one?
Horribly underinformed as I am on LCK, which is probably disgusting as a LOL esports podcast. I just feel like Damon's consistency is going to just plow through a best of 5, and if they drop a game, they'll fix it, and it won't matter. So I don't think there's enough to dismantle of Damwon that DRX can consistently exploit.
Like, my biggest thing with this is I don't think Dragon X have figured out anything to actually beat Damwon with, considering, as Eric pointed out, it's Damwon picked 3 relatively different team compositions in terms of their goals, particularly in the bottom lane in these 3 games and in the summer finals in LCK. And while Dragon X did do some really good work in their group and played excellent League of Legends and looked as good as they've looked in a while, I don't know if you found a solution to actually beating Damwon here, because I look at these 3 bottom lanes that were played in these finals. Game 1, Caitlyn Lux, super lane dominant into Jhin Pike, super duper lane dominant, build an advantage, take care of it, scale to the late game, whatever. Game 2, Kalista Alistar, big team fighting advantage, big player on that. Game 3, Draven Pantheon, we're going to murder you, level 2. And like, Damwon has all these tools, and I don't see Dragon X having the tools to fix this problem. So I think this is going to be a pretty easy series for Damwon, particularly because of the familiarity, and I don't think it's going to be that close. All right, that's series number 1. Series number 2 is the LPL Civil War, which I think is a much more interesting series. In Suning and JD Gaming, Suning coming out as winners of Group A, and JD Gaming coming out seconds to Damwon out of Group B. So, Eric, I'm going to start with you once more. Who do you think has the edge of these 2 teams who have never played each other in a best of 5 before?
So in my pick'ems originally, I put Suning over JDG, but then I realized that my heart and like predicting upsets is what completely destroyed my pick'ems in groups. So then I just went with logic and I put JDG winning the series. And really what it boils down to me is, if you look at this matchup, like, both teams have power performances out of their top laner and out of their jungler. And that's how they build advantages, and then how they then pressure the game state. Suning uses that to just like to build like micro advantages and then punish every mistake you make to just like win the game on the spot. Oh my gosh, he is right there. Hi, guy. You're gonna come with me. To just win every game on the spot, and then whereas JDG uses it to build advantages, so then they can just team fight you to death in some of these fights with Loken and Yagao and Lumao doing work. Yeah, I didn't remember how to say it properly, and Lumao doing work. And so I really expect that JDG is going to be less punishable than the team Suning was running up against so far. And I expect that Kanavi and Zoom are just going to outplay Bin and SOFM. And so I'm having JDG exit this group currently.
Steven, thoughts on this series?
Suning getting out just because I'm having PTSD from bin barrels.
Dirty.
It hurts. It's so soon. I think SOFM has played really well, and obviously been. I think, I mean, Sword Art, and I don't think Angel. I think we talked about like Angel being a concern earlier in the tournament, and I think he's done well enough.
He was really only punished in that first game against G2 for some bad positioning that lost them that game. And the rest of the series, he looked fine. Serviceable, even. People let him play Syndra, which I talked about going into groups is like their like way of protecting him in these games is like put him on Syndra or Galio. So it doesn't matter if he's like slightly behind in CS, he can still show up to team fights and be relatively safe or survivable, you know? And that was let to happen because Bin and SOFM were popping off. against JDG, I don't see those being lopsided matchups, and I don't see that the way the teams approach the game will favor like letting things like that slide as much. His position will be very questionable when he's playing a game against like Loken on Ashe most likely and Lumao on Bard, and they're just chucking ults at him, and like it'll like I think he's going to get punished more in this series, or that's what I expect. I would love for Suning to take this, but like just from what I've seen so far, analytically, I think Zoom is gonna actually be able to take advantage of when Bin over aggresses, or when his inexperience does show, and he like forces these fights, because he definitely had situations in these games where he could have been punished in groups and just
was
outplayed,
in some of them.
And was in some of them, but then he would like consistently outplay, especially against teams that had weaker on top sides of the map, showing up like Impact, cough. So like I would expect that to continue, is where I'm at, and Zoom and Kanavi are much more punishing than what they've been up against so far.
A couple things from this, just looking at these two teams did play each other one best of 3 each in spring and summer this year. And in the spring one, Zoom was unavailable for JDG. He wasn't able to play for a good chunk of spring split this year because I forget why, but there was a reason for it. And JDG won both of these series, 2-1 in the spring, 2-0 in the summer. And I have not like gone back and watched these games at all, but just looking at purely at KDAs and numbers, JDG did a really good job completely neutralizing SOFM in the games that were played between these two teams this year, which seems like a real good way to deal with a lot of the problems that Suning causes you. Like in this first series, in springtime, and obviously Suning are a better team now than they were at this point, but SOFM across 3 games, including a win going 1-7-7, feels like a really winning recipe against Suning. Like, you can have great performances from Bin and from the bot lane and from whatever, but if you take SOFM out of the equation, it feels like that's a really good way to get Suning's number and get them out of the picture. So I think that's going to be a huge factor for this. Obviously, SOFM's been a big deal for Suning in their games and has had outstanding performances, but if JD knows how to deal with him, then I think they're going to win this series pretty comfortably. So that's my take, and I'm sticking to
wrong. Yeah,
we'll find out. I mean, Suning are technically the 1 seed, so but I think the common knowledge is that JDG should probably come out on top there. On Saturday in the early morning, we get a not regional matchup that we don't have prior data for in Top Esports against Fnatic. Top Esports coming out top of Group D, and Fnatic coming out as the 2 seed out of Group C. So, Steven, what are your initial thoughts going into Top Esports against Fnatic?
I think they have a chance. I believe Top will take it, but like I think Fnatic thrives in unfamiliar territory when someone doesn't know how to deal with whatever they're gonna do. Bwipo and it's such a. I think it's really a toss-up. Like, I think momentum's going to be very important. Like, that game 1 and game 3 are going to be very, very telling. Obviously, the game 3 more so. But I have Top winning, but I still think Fnatic has a chance. But they're going to have to pull out some cheddar cheese to do it.
Eric, how do you see this going?
So the problem is that Fnatic hasn't won with cheddar cheese. Like, they've only lost with cheddar cheese. I think they're going to lose because they'll try. All right, so TES, both 369 and Knight have played 6 unique champions each out of 6 games. They have no repeat picks. Fnatic has only won with Nemesis on Lucian and Orianna, and with Bwipo on meta top laners. And by meta, I mean Ornn or Volibear. That's it. Whenever they do anything else, Fnatic loses. And it's very telling. I don't see this going well. If Fnatic can play cheese and have it work, or just in general, if Bwipo can like do really well in lane and 369 rolls threes instead of nines, which he's been doing so far, they'll have a good shot. And I think it really needs to be Bwipo continuing to perform, because he did great in groups. Bwipo had a 27.8% damage share in group stage, which was like the 4th or 5th highest in the entire group stage, behind Jackie Love, who's on the other side of this matchup, Ruler, and Gadget from UOL. So I am
to do that as a top laner at
on Ornn and
top
Volibear,
laner who's been playing Ornn and Volibear, like totally nuts. A great series.
Ornn is broken. That's why this is happening anyway.
He also gets an extremely low gold share for his team compared with other top laners, whereas 369 gets a really high gold share. So like it's very fascinating that this is how it's been playing out. Albeit it could look like 369's gold share is really high because he just gets tons of solo kills. So maybe that's like overloaded, but like it really is that like Bwipo has been their big outstanding player performance. But like I said, he's up against top, who's looked incredible. Jackie Love's damage share is 36%.
so shut him down.
Which is absolutely ludicrous.
Jackie Love makes Senna look like a different champion.
Yes, like it's still incredibly broken, which it is, and they should fix it. Right, please. But like that's my big thing is that top has actually been playing with Champion Ocean in top and mid and winning matchups in like all those games except for the one that got snowballed from level 1 by FlyQuest. So I don't see how Fnatic, who has failed every time they've tried to break away from their set meta picks, like I don't see how they win this without like finally making it magically click, which they couldn't do in the finals against G2. And I just have low confidence that they're going to make it magically happen now, where they can win without like their power picks, which are like literally 2 champions mid top jungle, in order to have this series succeed.
I think neither of you guys have hit Fnatic's actual win condition yet, because I think the most interesting matchup in this series is self-made Karsa.
Yeah, valid.
Okay, yeah.
Because
that's true.
I think that we can talk about cheese picks with Nemesis and Bwipo, and we can talk about how they've only been successful in certain settings. The player that has the most potential to create a mismatch, generally for Fnatic this season at all, regardless of the matchup, has been self-made. And I think there's a chance that you can find an opening against Karsa and get self-made ahead. Which I think that is where I would try to go if I was Fnatic, to find an advantage, is try to get self-made a winning matchup, try to get self-made ahead so he can pressure the map and get those solo lanes ahead no matter what else they're doing.
So that's like the recipe for Fnatic is power self-made. My big problem with this is like having watched LPL playoffs, I've watched Karsa beat SOFM and Kanavi, who are both more aggressive, like thirstier junglers who play these kinds of picks, and he puts on a clinic in just like out macroing them on the map, understanding what they're going for, and then being there and making it happen. Like that's why I think Karsa is a top jungler, even though he's not as aggressive as Selfmade or Kanavi or SOFM in like how he approaches this game state. He just is like incredibly good at understanding what their mentality is, and then being in the right place at the right time, and then punishing them for this play style. And I don't think that that'll work either. I'm very low on Fnatic as a whole. They like looked really good in groups, I get, but I still don't think that they're going to be able to make the magic happen in this best of 5 scenario.
Yeah, like literally the recipe is you need Selfmade to play the series of his life. 100%. Like that is a must for them to win this series. And you need Hylissang to hit heads every single time. Like those are the variables. If because Hillsong we've seen can make absolute game changing plays on one side or the other one, both. And if Hillsong's coin hits heads every time, things can happen. If you have this, does LPL know how to deal with split push pike? Does anyone know how to deal with split push pike?
I don't think Fnatic knows how to deal with split push pike.
I don't think Fnatic knows how to deal with split push pike either. But like, it's a variable, right? Like, if you play these two teams straight up and nothing weird happens, whether it's cheese picks, whether it's cheese situations in the map, TS wins 9 times out of 10. You need variables, and that's why I think like Selfmade and Hillsong are the keys for Fnatic, because you kind of know what you're going to get from the other 3 members of the roster. It's going to be consistent. My last note in the series is Jackie Love had the best trash talk of anybody going into this series. It was phenomenal and well edited to show him, I'm walking out of the stage with the World Championship trophy after beating your ass 2 years ago. Solid flex. Good flex. Solid flex.
And he only looks better than he did 2 years ago, too.
Yep,
like,
which is terrifying.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I think we all have top winning this. Like, we try to make a case for Fnatic,
it's more fun that way.
If you make it, you're picking top. Yeah, you have to try and create a situation where it's interesting, even if you think top's going to win. And lastly, I think this might be our most interesting of the 4 series in terms of results. We have Gen G against G2, which G2 comes out as the 2nd seed out of Group A after losing in tiebreakers to Suning in dramatic bin fashion. I assume if you're watching the LA Sports, you've seen G2, the end of G2 Suning tiebreaker. Incredible game all the way through, worth watching all the way through, but just an outstanding winning play by Bin that I still feel like could have gone a different way. But Perks played an incredible game that game, was almost to a point where he could have solo carried G2 to the win had he not gotten popped by a Gangplank barrel. So G2 comes in there, Gen G comes out on top of the somewhat chaotic Group C, not really looking their best as they do, but not really needing to, given the arguably weaker contents of Group C. Struggled a bit against TSM, but came out with the win after some questionable shot calling by TSM. Shock. Eric, how do you see this one going between Gen G and G2?
So, Genji continues to be like the team that plays best around bot lane in this tournament. Like, Ruler has, like I said, he's the 2nd highest damage share out of any player in the tournament with 32.5%, and he's got like a 780 gold lead at 15 minutes on average, which is a lot, especially considering the CS diff isn't necessarily as high, which means they're getting plates, they're getting kills, they're forcing things bot lane. That's what they've been doing. I actually, though, think G2 has the advantage in this series. There's a few reasons why. That's because, for one, G2's best player is in the same, so far this tournament, is in the same lane as Ruler. I'm talking, of course, about Mickey, who's looked phenomenal and has been killing 80 carries repeatedly. So I'm expecting G2 to be able to match Ruler in Life, especially with Life not having the best showing so far. Awkwardly due to a bad summoner spell choice in one of their games, but still. And then I also am expecting G2 to be able to approach this best of 5 like they approach all best of 5s, which is having more impetus in pick ban, more adaptation, and being able to really punish how the other team wants to play. Rascal's best champion so far has been Volibear, and he's looked good on it. He's gotten it multiple times. Volibear's also been played decently by G2 in both top and jungle. So I'm expecting a lot of Volibear and Set flex picks for G2 in this series, which gives them a massive advantage in pick ban, and then they use it to win out on these different lanes. Volibear, they can flex between top and jungle. Set, they can flex between jungle and support. I'm expecting that. And mid.
He hasn't
I don't
played
think
it,
Caps
though,
is
right?
going to play it. That's not
Okay.
a Cap
I was
style.
just-
No, he has not. And it's not a Cap style pick. I expect Cap to pick more champs you flex on, and like, which is awkward to say when like the best players in the tournament are like Chovy, but like I'm expecting that to still be a like how some of this plays out, and then with that in mind, then I expect these flex to really help out, and I also expect it to buffer for Yankos, who's had like a not very good, in my opinion, group stage performance when they've been mainly having him play Nidalee, because they have to prove they can play Nidalee just with this meta in order to have an advantage in pick ban. So that's kind of how I'm expecting it to play out, is they actually can go back to their roots, they can play some action junglers to snowball lanes, and then they can take over.
A couple of other stats that you didn't highlight. You've taken some note of the damage share across a few champions. Mickey has the highest damage share of any support in the tournament. This may not surprise you.
I confess I didn't look at support damage shares, but it does not surprise me.
It is just over 12%, which is hilarious. It's not...
Whoa!
Yeah.
Over 10% on a support is nuts. Most of them are like max like 5 or 7.
So Mickey and Lumao are both 12%. Mickey's just a little bit higher. And Core was the other one over 10%, but the rest of them are down where you would expect. But just it should be noted that Mickey is a percentage of this for G2. The other thing in terms of damage numbers that I think is interesting is Caps deals by far the most DPM of any mid laner in the tournament, by a good 70 over anyone else, and has the second highest kill participation per game.
So my only nitpick with that stat, like the damage number or the damage per minute numbers, is damage like the per minute stats are always better the longer your games go. And Group A had like the longest games out of any of them, with G2 and Suning's sets all being bangers. So like, that does skew that number, but Caps does do great damage, and I have him as higher than BDD in my power rankings, which I still stand by for that lane. So I expect that to continue to be a theoretical point of strength, especially if they find ways to put Yankos on junglers who can snowball lanes as opposed to power farming.
Yeah, I do think Yankos is the key to this series. The questions around his picks specifically, I think, kind of are going to keep following G2 around until they figure it out. And putting him on Sejuani is a little bit of a meme, but hey, maybe put him on Set.
I think putting him on Braum is the actual meme. Like, remember, he is the best Braum player EU.
And like, even if it's just like, like a Volibear flag, like, he's on something with Engage, he's on something that can dive turrets, he's on something that can make plays happen, rather than this high mechanics power farm thing that doesn't really feel like it fits how G2 wants to play most of the time. And I think that their coaching staff, I trust to be smart enough to have figured this out by watching what's been going on and watching how they've been working. I think they're going to figure this out. I don't think Gen.G has been at the point that they've needed to be at to look like a real threat in this tournament. And this tournament is this quarterfinal, partially because it is the closest one and partially because of the teams involved, is the one that doesn't really feel like it has a legitimate threat to win the tournament in it based on team's current form. And that might change based on how this looks. G2 might look revitalized. Ruler might go back to looking like the best ADC in the world. But as of right now, whoever comes out of this is not going to be favored in their semifinal, assuming things go according to plan. And it is a chance for both of these teams to take a step up from the level they showed in group stage and show that they figured some stuff out that might make them more interesting. Obviously, like, they both have the cred to show we've been there, we've done this. G2 Worlds finalist last year, Gen.G previously world champions with a lot of the same players on the roster. You can do it, but we got to see it, and now's the time. So, Steven, do you have G2 winning this series?
No,
as well,
yeah, I
or
have
are you
G2
going with
just
Koreans?
because you have to.
I briefly contemplated trusting in the power of G2 and putting them to win my bracket, and then I remembered the same thing that Eric remembered and said that putting upsets was what ruined my group stage. So I have Damwon winning the tournament. This may surprise you. It shouldn't if you've listened to any of the previous parts of the show.
But to actually just put it out there.
I think Damwon's going to see with this tournament. I think they're going to win it.
Yeah. It's been kind of noted by a lot of analysts that there's been very few upsets this year. And a part of it's due to the teams who are good are incredibly good at snowballing leads and then closing out games with advantages. But part of it's the meta. Like, this meta is just really good for teams that can build early leads and then stick with them. So like, upsets are much more based around creativity with like level 1 plays and then making things happen at that point in the game. And that's where we saw the upsets, and those only work for so long. I don't think that'll hold in best of fives very well. So it's going to have to be more like, it's going to have to be more solid, just actually building early leads, fairly, quote unquote, and then taking the game that way.
Eric, who wins your bracket?
Damwon.
G2.
Steven, who wins your bracket? Respect?
I think they won it.
Love it. So by our picks, this means that top
Yes.
is winning the tournament. Congrats to top.
That's who I know is gonna win, but I picked
I don't know,
G2
I
if
think-
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Suning's coming.
I don't know what you're talking about. They're just gonna show up. Yeah.
Like
I'd also be really happy for Loken winning a tournament. That would be really cool to see.
at this point, like, Gen G are probably the longest odds of any single team to win the tournament. But
Yeah.
I mean, even they, like I just said, even they have a little bit of they've got a record, they've got a chance, they've got experience, they've been there. It still kind of is anybody's tournament, but there's also some really strong favorites. So, final thoughts, because we have to do a little bit out of the esports every time. Steven, what are your thoughts on Seraphine's release?
The release is fine. The marketing up to the beginning is not okay, in my opinion, especially when you make the character that people are simping for $30. That's a little rough, and that's a little predatory. If we want to get on other companies for being predatory in practices, I think this is a little manipulative. I think it's very manipulative as far as what I would want to see out of Riot and what they're doing. The only argument I can make for it, which is immediately done away with the price tag of launching a character with a legendary skin, is maybe putting some representation for mental health. But it just, even that tastes bad coming out, and I think they should reconsider doing things like this in the future.
Eric, thoughts on Seraphine's release?
Well, you mean
Sona 2.
Sona 2.0? It's definitely, the kit is just Sona. They can lie about it all they want. It's just Sona revamped. But like the thing that really surprises me is that they even released a base Seraphine that's not the KDA one. That's kind of weird. Like, what's the actual lore on ordinary Seraphine? I'd be totally cool with Riot going to more of a multiverse-oriented mindset, where like these characters' base versions are from their alternate timelines or whatever. That's what a lot of other MOBAs that have been less successful have done, kind of out of the gates. It gives them some. It frees up some of their space in like the lore too. Like, this is what Marvel Comics did and DC, right? When you add these alternate timelines in and make them just as important as the mainstream one, all of a sudden you don't have these convoluted conspiracy theory webs to justify these characters existing in the same universe, and then like it bogs down everything, and that's not healthy. But like, the price tag point doesn't really. That doesn't bother me as much, because I think KDA and Star Guardians are still like, they're like best grossing skin lines, and that's because they have stories and narrative. So like I'm not going to complain about you giving me lore. I just like what's this loreless stuff that you released that doesn't apparently matter?
Yeah, well, just so you
bothers me.
know, the she's the Piltover pop star e-girl, whatever. But her little flying stage is powered by a Bracken crystal, which is Skarner's people, from when their souls are ripped out and put into rocks, and she just uses that to power her equipment. She's like, oh yeah, that's cool.
If you
Wow.
haven't been on Captain Flowers' Twitter account anytime in the last few days, I'd recommend going to give it a scroll, because the reactions of the Skarner name community to the events of Seraphine's release have been interesting to watch, to say the least. And Seraphine herself, it is in her lore that she can hear like the voices of the Bracken in her crystals, and there's like a part of her voiceover that's like, Skarner, do you want to hear what the
hear their
voices of your
song?
people are singing to me? I can
Do
hear,
you hear the whales? Yeah, it's worse than
Wow.
you thought.
So if you go to her voiceover and listen to the stuff that's like related to
rough.
Skarner, it's
A lot
really
of them
kind of
are.
messed up.
Wow. That's all
So
I
if you
got.
didn't know, yeah, go give Captain Flowers' Twitter account a scroll.
Yeah.
It's a good time. And finally, as we usually end, Steven, what's your favorite thing you played in League of Legends this week? What's your favorite thing you
Yes,
did? Was it
that
running it
actually
down
is
on
my
Lilia?
favorite pastime, is running it down on Lilia and then getting hard flamed before the game even starts with a jungle diff at the 2-minute mark. I haven't done anything spicy. It makes me sad. I did complain to Riot support about Clash being 4 games long, and you have to wait for each round for all the games to complete, and it's very long, and they were very cool about it, and they talked me off the ledge. So thank you, Riot Twitter, Riot support Twitter specifically, and being some cool people.
Shout out.
Eric, what's your favorite thing you've done in League of Legends this week?
I mean, usually it's just like play Teemo and be toxic. That's most of it. I've been playing Annie mid just to like add something to my arsenal that's not a tank, and but you know, like Teemo is generally speaking the most fun, self-indulgent thing you can do in League of Legends.
Man, have you played this set of TFT? Annie is a tank. It's very unpleasant. My favorite thing that I played in League of Legends this week was I played some ultra rapid fire, some Earth earlier this week, and I had the challenge or the quest in the shop where I needed to win a game on Lee Sin. So I'm not a very good Lee Sin player. I know this and openly acknowledge it. I can do a little like very boomer mechanics ward hop, but we'll make it happen. So I lock in the Lee Sin and I look around at my team and I see 3 ADCs locked in on the team with me. And I'm like, well, okay, what can we do with this? So I'm like, okay, we're gonna go to my tank rune page and we're gonna take Guardian, because they're gonna be some squishy boys in Earth, and that's how it's gonna be. And then we're gonna take W first, and we're gonna max W first, and we're gonna build Ardent Sensor.
So you didn't play Lee
And we're gonna
Sin.
be Ardent Sensor with them.
You played Yumi.
And I just jumped around Wing people. We won the top lane level 1 because I just kept shielding because my shield was up every second, and people weren't ready for it. And I just kept dodging the skill shots, and then they surrendered in 10 minutes because we were too fed. So Ardent Sensor Lee Sin Rush. That's the new meta, even though it has mana on it that you can't use. Just
Maybe
press,
Hillsing will
rush
do it.
It's
That's
the
how they'll
play.
win.
Yeah, definitely don't do it in jungle. But I don't think I would have been able to farm jungle camps, but I was sure really annoying in lane. So that was my favorite thing I did in League of Legends this week. Ardent Sensor, Rush, Guardian, Lee Sin in Earth.
The Savant.
Try it out at home. So with that, we will be back at some point next week to recap the quarterfinals and preview the semifinals as Worlds cranks its way towards its conclusion. And yeah, if you have feedback, if you have thoughts, if you want to flame Steven for losing last week's episode, find him on Twitter at Ireland Tweets with a 3 instead of the E. Find Eric on Twitter at Dark Penguin with a 4 instead of the A in dark. And find me on Twitter at Prof Cedar with no numbers in my name because I'm cooler than these boys.
I will not be bullied.
And yeah, also please check out funkygames.com and funkygames.store. Is that what it is? To get your sweet merch and get your nerd t-shirts and stuff handmade.
Technically everything is handmade.
Technically everything is handmade, but made right here, right there in St. Louis, Missouri for your desires. And check out any other content we've got going on. Check out streamers. Check out the Cat Gibson walking across the screen
Gibson
right
live
now.
stream. Let's
Art.
go.
Yeah, Eric just streams Gibson and McGuire walking around. That could be some great content. Best Twitch IRL content you could imagine. So with that, we will be back next week at some point, probably about now. And yeah, so this has been episode 4 of Reaction Time, and we will see you guys next week. Peace.